Back again with Lord Christopher Monckton, former advisor to the British Prime Minister, Margaret Thatcher, and climate change expert, and John Bolton, former U.S. ambassador and also Fox News contributor. Okay, Lord Monckton up at the blackboard. Boy, that's intimidating. Have I ever done that to you? That's not good. Yes, my lord.
Pay attention, Beck.
Yes.
5 points from Gryffindor for smiling in class.
All right, what do you have?
Right. Here is why there is no point, economically speaking, in doing anything to curb our carbon emissions, even if, as we now know, in fact, the UN is wrong. But let's pretend it's right.
Okay.
Here's why nothing will work. We burn 30 billion tons a year of CO2 worldwide. All right? 30 billion tons a year. Now, that is the equivalent of 2 parts per million per year in the atmosphere. So that's 15 billion tons per part per million, all right? Are you with us so far?
Not really, but I'll pretend, yes.
Good, right, that's very simple. Right. 30 divided by 2, 15 billion, okay.
Got it.
With us so far. Now, the UN says we're going to increase the amount of CO2 in the atmosphere, unless we do anything about it, by 468 parts per million in the next century, 468 ppmv. So that means, if you multiply that by that, you get 7 trillion tons we're going to emit of CO2 if we don't do any mitigation over the next century. 7 trillion tons. Okay. Now, they say that those 7 trillion tons are going to cause 7 Fahrenheit of warming in the next century. That's wrong, but that's what they say. That means that in order to forestall 1 Fahrenheit degree of warming, you have to forego the emission of 1 trillion tons of CO2. Now, divide 1 trillion tons by the number of tons, the 30 billion tons per year that we started with, that we're burning at the moment worldwide, and how many years is it going to take before we have saved 1 Fahrenheit degree? Come along, Bolton. Beck.
Yeah, no, I won't be alive.
Neither of you can work this out. It's 33 years for 1 Fahrenheit degree. Now, 33 years means no automobiles anywhere on the planet, no electricity, no planes, no trains, no hospitals, no factories, no carbon emissions at all for 33 years, just for 1 Fahrenheit degree. That is why it is absolutely no point trying to mitigate carbon emissions. It makes not the slightest difference to the climate. End of lesson.
John, how many different ways, when you were in the UN, are they coming after our sovereignty and our money?
Well, in a variety of different ways. And let's talk about one that Lord Monckton mentioned earlier, which I think is a continuing source of concern, and that's the idea of a kind of international tax. This has been proposed in a lot of different circumstances: a tax on international airline tickets, a tax on international banking transactions. Here in Copenhagen, it's a tax on environmental related things. But the point is to provide a source of revenue to supranational institutions independent of the decisions of member governments, because the left internationally has recognized that the funding mechanism for the UN doesn't work. When you assess contributions annually and you have to depend on those Americans in Congress to pass annual appropriations, they fear Congress cutting off their money. So they're constantly looking for sources through some kind of tax mechanism that will bring in revenue that they can use independently of Congress. That's why in the Law of the Sea Treaty there's a revenue source from seabed mining. That issue, which sounds mindlessly technical, is something that comes up over and over again, and something that members of Congress and the American people need to know about and be concerned about.
When we're talking about CO2, the idea is the more CO2, the warmer it gets.
That's the idea.
Right.
Not true, but that's the idea.
But we're in a cooling period.
Yes.
And I'm hearing now scientists say that the cooling that is happening only proves how warm it's getting.
That's right, and that makes no sense, does it?
No.
No, none whatever.
So bring over, these are from Newsweek. Did you see these?
Yes, I've seen the original article from 1975 from which these are the two graphs.
Show me, put these up on the screen.
Here you've got the fall in temperatures from around 1945 roughly until around 1970. And by that stage, they were all beginning to say, oh, we're heading for global cooling, we're heading for another ice age. And John Holdren, who is now the science advisor, believe it or not, to the President of the United States, he said at this time, in 1975, this is what he said. He said there's going to be so much ice accumulating in Antarctica because of the extreme cold that's coming because of our activities on the planet, that ice will fall over into the ocean and cause the largest tidal wave in human history and wipe out coastal civilizations everywhere. That was John Holdren in 1975.
What year did that happen?
Oh,
big tidal wave. I missed that. You know what?
Yeah.
There was no Fox News at that time. That's why you never saw that.
Never got told.
Back in just a second. It's cooler. The Earth is now going cooling trend. How can you have so much CO2 and going into a cooling trend? It doesn't make any sense if it's caused by CO2. But this in it has a climate or a carbon debt that we'll have to pay for the rest of the world because we use so much carbon. You say that you can disprove the CO2 and the global warming.
That's right. It has now been disproved, not by me, I should say, but by Professor Richard Lindzen of MIT. Now, you saw the economic calculations I showed you on the Lord board up there.
My head hurt.
And that's very, very simple. It just says 1 trillion tons, 1 Fahrenheit degree of warming foregone, and that means there's no point in trying to do anything about it. But now, if we can go to the Wise Up window, I'd like to show you a graph from Lindzen's paper. Now, what you see there is there are 11 separate computer models graphed there, and they all show that as temperature rises at the sea surface from left to right along the bottom there, then the outgoing radiation at the top of the atmosphere is predicted to fall because all the greenhouse gases in the atmosphere that we're putting there are stopping the radiation from getting out. But these are predictions by the Xbox 360s and PlayStations of the UN. It's what I call globalized groupthink. There is no scientific basis for this. Indeed, it contravenes the laws of thermodynamics.
I mean, I'm sorry for being such an idiot here,
Right.
but that makes no sense to me. Let me just see if I have it right.
Okay.
The red line going down is the prediction, right?
That's right, yes.
And it means that what's escaping out into space.
You get less and less escaping out to space as the temperature increases. As the temperature increases, less and less radiation gets out to space.
Right.
Because the greenhouse gases thicken because of the temperature increasing, and they stop it getting out. That's the prediction. That's the official theory. If you don't predict that, you can't say there's a problem with CO2.
All right.
If we could have the next slide, I'll show you what really happens. And now look in the middle there. That is a measured result. It took 20 years to compile that one little graph. Professor Richard Lindzen of MIT, the foremost meteorologist in the world, he knows more about this than anyone else alive. He took 20 years. He had to wait until he had enough data points that he could do that graph reliably. And it shows that as the temperature increases, so the amount of radiation going out into space also increases. You'll see that the direction of the graph is completely different in the real world. That's the green one from the Earth Radiation Budget Experiment satellite.
So the green is what actually happened.
That's what really happened.
And the red lines all around it
are
what all the predictions.
That's the Xbox 360s, exactly. And so what we've got is a measured result that shows that all the guesses, all the groupthink, all the consensus, so-called, which you can see in those models, they all have a consensus among themselves, but that consensus is now proven by direct and meticulous measurement to be wrong. And why is this particular paper and this particular slide so important? Because what it is showing is that outgoing radiation is not being trapped down here, as Al Gore and the others say it is. It's getting out to space very much as it always did, and therefore, instead of getting 7 Fahrenheit of warming this century with a doubling of CO2, just 1 Fahrenheit. Small, harmless, and generally beneficial. And that paper, history will relate, is the end of the scare. Al, baby, if you really think that you want to raise the profile of this issue, then why don't you agree to debate with me on international television? The fees we'll earn, apart from anything else, would be enormous, and I know you'd love that, because money seems to stick to you very rapidly. I want you to face me in a debate about global warming, and if you don't dare, I want you to remain silent about that subject forever from now on. Are you a coward, or will you step up to the plate? Are you an armchair quarterback, or are you going to get suited up and get onto that field?